Almost all of us tend to spend a great deal of our lives wanting others to be more like us, or wanting ourselves to be like them. One of the two. We compare all the time. Now, how do I know that? It's easy. How do I know that we want other people to be more like us? Disappointment. Almost every time we're disappointed in somebody. Now, you may not have noticed this because this is so common, the comparing, the wanting to be like other people, the wanting other people to be like us. It is so common that it's the air we breathe. That's how common. So take disappointment. For the next, 24 hours, you could do this with each one of these words. Look at every time you're disappointed in something, more particularly another person. You're disappointed that they didn't see it your way, that they don't judge things your way, that they don't do things your way, they don't feel things your way. That's why we're disappointed. How could you, not do it my way, not be like me? Conflict. Almost always disappointment that other people are not more like us. What are we conflicting about? That we're the same? That wouldn't make any sense at all. So conflict is about wanting other people to be like us. Expectations, that one's really clear. We expect other people to what? Be perfect? We're actually a little smarter than that. No, we just want to be like us. Fussing about how inconvenient people are. How many times have I heard this expression? I would never do that. What are we saying? We wish that other people would be more like we are. Henry Higgins in the old movie, I guess you have to be old to even know about this movie, My Fair Lady. I'm surprised there hasn't been a remake lately. Henry Higgins, one of the main characters, is singing a song, and in the midst of the song, he's lamenting the differences between men and women. Men are like this and women are like this. And in the end, he says, why can't a woman be more like us? Meaning men. Why can't a woman be more like a man? And he actually uses that phrase too. Well, we do it all day long. How come other people can't be more like me? Because, well, then my life would be infinitely more convenient. How do we know that we want ourselves to be more like other people? Again, easy. Envy. Every time we envy somebody else, we wish we were more like them. Jealousy, more like them. Every time we feel small, compared to what? Other people. We compare ourselves all the time. How come we're not taller, better looking, smarter, have more money, blah, blah, blah. So we spend our whole lives wishing that we're all the same. The craziness of all this is we need each other. We need each other to be different. I need you to be different so I can learn how to love somebody other than myself. So I can learn to love you. Then I need other people to be different so I can learn to love them. How can I say that I really know what loving is when I can only love somebody if they have all the qualities that I already like? That's not loving. That's just, common sense. It's like saying, well, I know how to love. Really, what's an example of you loving? I love ice cream. Well, not a trick to love ice cream. We need each other to be different. Many Christmases, like uncounted Christmases, our family is gathered together, and one of the things that we do is to put together a puzzle. And it's fun to watch, fun for me, to watch how different people are, what they're naturally attracted to do. So here's this. Usually we pick something hard, like at least 1,000 piece, but usually a 1,500 piece or sometimes a 2,000 piece puzzle, only of a certain brand. And I'm not doing advertisements because they fit together so meticulously, so perfectly. I mean, you at the end pick up the entire puzzle by any corner and it doesn't shift. But it's fun to watch what people choose to do. Some people specialize, if you can specialize in putting puzzles together, in the edges, the edge pieces. They sit there and maniacally, and these puzzles are very cleverly designed because, much like people, no two pieces are the same. In an entire puzzle of this particular brand, they went out of business some years ago, and apparently now they're back. They're all different. So it's not like the edge pieces are really obvious. Flat, and then, whatever the puzzle does. Oh no, there are plenty of pieces within the puzzle that are flat too. I hate the edge pieces. So I couldn't tell you why. Maybe when I was a kid, who knows? I was just joking. I just do for some reason. Other people love them. I'm delighted that they are different from me. I don't want them to be like me. I don't want to be like them. They do the edges. Hallelujah. Some people love to do what I just look at and just dread, like death, the sky. or you do a piece with at sea. So there's the ocean, blue. There are people who just love that stuff. Not me. I like the intersection of different colors and different shapes. The weirder, the more complicated it is, the better. And with all of us together, with our different innate qualities and skills and desires, manage to put a puzzle together far faster than if we had an equal number of people who had exactly the same taste. It works better when we're different. Now, we could overanalyze this. Does my preference for certain kind of pieces mean that I'm a Capricorn? Does it mean I'm a blue-C-2 personality? You've all seen the endless books on personality quadrants, and if I see one more color wheel of quadrants, I probably won't read it. So we could do all that analysis. Nah, we're just different. Solution? Accept it. Even enjoy it. I would suggest the latter. It's a lot more fun. New subject. I have found this in my life. I found this quote. When what you need and what you want coincide, that is growing up. I really like that. Actually, what we want innately tends to be what's easy, what's fun, what's exciting, what's instantaneous, what's rewarding, what's pleasurable, and so on. That almost by definition is what we want. I mean, I do. I want to become perfect overnight. Turns out it actually took me several weeks. I couldn't resist. So what we want tends to be easy and fun. What we need can include elements of that. I mean, what we need can be really very fun and rewarding. But what we all need is to be genuinely happy. And that involves, unavoidably, feeling loved, being loving, learning to be responsible. And those traits require practice, attention, consistency, diligence, not always easy. Feeling loved, for example, requires that I tell the truth about myself, including my flaws. Yeah, that's rarely comfortable in the beginning. Feeling loved involves trusting, which is never easy in the beginning if you haven't done it. Learning to be loving requires being selfless, not reacting to what other people do, but choosing how I behave. It requires being wrong instead of defending myself. It requires me dropping all my weapons of protection. Being responsible requires work, which I'm not always a fan of, being accountable, taking control of our choices instead of demanding that other people change. So what we need, all of those things that I just listed, some of that's not comfortable at all. In the end, though, being happy is far easier than not. Being unhappy is anger and protection and being afraid and withdrawing and acting like a victim, and all of that will absolutely occupy your life. Anger alone is just utterly exhausting. Being happy is easier than not being happy. But in the short term, we really get seduced by what's easy, by what we want. We want that. And if we want it badly enough, we really believe, pay attention, because we all do this trick. If we want a thing badly enough, we believe that we need it. We just changed the definition of need, and poof, we're justified. The more fervently we express our wants, you've seen a child do this. I've watched my grandchildren do it with their parents, which of course makes me laugh uncontrollably because their parents did it with me. I watched my grandchildren with their parents say, "But Dad, I need to play to the end of this video game," or whatever it is when it's bedtime. "I really need it." And I watched their dad, my son, pick one, say, "You really need to go to bed. I understand that you want to play it, but that's not what you need." No. My grandchildren are very persuasive. No, they say to their father as though their father was a peer. "No, Dad, you don't understand. I need this." And the fervor, the sincerity with which they say it is really seductive. The more they do it, the more they believe it. And we do it as adults. I'm not laughing at the kids. I'm not laughing at us adults either, because we want to avoid hard stuff. The more we say a thing that we believe, the truer it becomes. And we use our sincerity to justify that we need a thing, however bad it is for us. This is tricky stuff, this wanting and needing. Hence the depth of the saying that when what you need and what you want coincide, that is growing up. New subject. In the process of learning how to be loving, we make astonishing mistakes. We can be stupid, we can be hurtful, we can be shaming, we can make our mistakes over and over again, and we can affect badly ourselves and other people. It occurred to me recently, how can we put that much garbage, our mistakes, in the soup of our lives and still have it turn out well? Pretty tough. How can we mix that many mistakes into the soup of our present lives and have the soup turn out well? How many pieces of gravel, how many pieces of putrid flesh that have been lying on the ground outside can you put in an actual stew and have the stew turn out well? Tastes good. Not many. But in our lives, it turns out we can. How does that work out? I can only think of one explanation, and it's actually a pretty good proof. God. I can't make all the garbage into soup. No matter how hard I try, I can't eliminate my past mistakes. But somehow, God does. Actually, a pretty good proof that God exists in ways that I can't begin to understand. I don't need to understand. I'm just grateful. New subject. We've talked on many occasions about how making good choices leads to increased happiness. That should be fairly self-evident. But we have also considerable evidence to support the association between joy and choice. In addition, every moment of just enjoying life, so we can see that making good choices leads to more joy. We can see that association. Now, in addition, so separate subject, Every moment of just enjoying life. Now, that's a kind of choice, but we're going to stick with just enjoying life increases our ability to enjoy it more, as opposed to being afraid that it's going to go away and doubting it and doing the stuff that most of us do a great deal. I've watched people in misery begin to experience happiness. And I have never personally seen anybody in an instant go from unhappy to complete joy. Never seen it. It may be possible, I just haven't seen it. In the beginning, after a lifetime with very little love and very little happiness, but plenty of fear and misery, we hardly even know what to do with peace and happiness. It's actually kind of weird. I just talked to a man this morning who, after 30-something years of being unhappy, in recent weeks even, has experienced whole days where he's happy. And now he's starting to, well, in the beginning, it started off with whole minutes, and then it turned into whole hours, and then he'd have a day. But then invariably, after a day or an hour or whatever, he'd go, well, maybe I'm not really happy. I just talked to a man today who said, I've been happy for 2 straight days. Now, in the beginning, he was getting the same amount of love. He was experiencing the joy, but it was sliding right off him because he didn't have a file to put it in. No matter how much you write on your computer, if you don't store it in a file, when you shut your computer down, it's gone. I'm sure some of you have had that experience. I don't do that so much anymore because I've learned that lesson by doing it stupidly. Once we find a place for happiness, once we allow ourselves to feel it, we can feel more, even if the amount of happiness available to us isn't greater. So it's like love and joy are infinitely abundant. Turns out that's true. There's no limit. Compare it to a large power plant. So we're going to tie this into the more love we allow ourselves to feel, the more we then can feel. And the more we can feel, the more we can feel the next time. So love and joy are infinite, kind of like a large power plant, which roughly has an output on average of about 1,000 megawatts or 1 gigawatt, or if you're scientifically minded, 1 times 10 to the 9th watts. It's a lot of watts. Or another way of saying it for us common people is a billion watts. A notebook computer or a small laptop consumes about 10 watts. 10. So to us individually, the power of a power plant, an average one, is essentially limitless. I'm using 10 watts and I have available to me 1 billion watts. Yeah, that would be a lot less. So essentially limitless. Our ability to tap into the infinite power plant is limited by the size of the wire into our homes. Maybe you didn't know that. Oh, those great big high tension wires that come from the plant, they're big. I mean, like the individual wires, and they run them in clusters. The individual wires are just huge, bigger than my finger. I mean, they're like more like rods. And then the wire gets smaller and smaller as it splits off, and then it goes into great big wires that run down your street, and then it goes into a transformer that you've seen on a pole near your house somewhere that's about the size of, about half my size. And the wires get smaller, and then the cord comes into your house, which is pretty big, and then it runs to the itty-bitty little lamp that you have next to your bedside, which if you stripped the coating off, you could, just bend back and forth and snap in two. So the gauge gets smaller and smaller. Our ability to tap into love in the beginning is similarly limited, like the gauge of a wire. In the beginning, we have a small gauge wire. The more we feel loved, the more we allow that wire to reach capacity, and this is unlike real metal wires, this is an organic thing. It's a spiritual thing. It's an emotional thing. The more we feel loved, the bigger the gauge of the wire gets. Amazing. Our capacity, our gauge increases, and eventually we can accept and give, return back to the circulation, vast quantities of love. But we have to have experience with it. And the more we do, the bigger the gauge gets, and the more infinite the possibilities get. This is a lot of fun. New subject. Addictions are, by their very definition, actually, very difficult to give up. If you have a behavior that's really easy to give up, like, hitting yourself in the head with a hammer, then it's unlikely that that will reach the level of an addiction. We use addictions to survive. We're in pain, so we drink compulsively, addictively. We use drugs. We please people for approval. We get angry. We control people, whatever. If we don't have love, we are in pain. Period. The two go together. Don't feel enough love, in pain. So we must do something to get rid of the pain, and we will. And depending on how we were raised, we'll choose A or B or C, or we all choose different addictions. But everybody gets addicted at some point when we're in pain. Now, simply trying not to use, like trying not to drink, trying not to be right all the time, trying not to please, is like trying not to breathe after we've been underwater for long enough that we're beginning to feel the scream to get air. So we come above the water and we just go, I don't need to breathe. Yeah, you're going to breathe. You will. Just like you're going to use an addiction if you're in enough pain. Notice my tone of voice. Yeah, you're going to use an addiction. It's just a fact. There's no accusation to it. It's not demeaning. It's not condescending. Well, because you're a fool, you're going to use an addiction. No, you're going to use an addiction because you're human. You can only hold your breath so long. And then we use. Solution. It's not holding your breath. And it's not breathing in water, which works out very poorly. So what do? How about get out of the water? That's what the love of other people does. They take your hand and they help you to a place that you didn't know existed. I just got through moments ago talking about a man who for 30-something years had been in pain and who now just cannot believe that he's been happy for a whole day or two. He said, I didn't know that it was possible to feel like this. Well, duh. That's how people stay in addictions. Nobody chooses, let's see, I could be happy, responsible, loving, be surrounded by a loving family, be having the time of my life. I need a drink. Nobody does that ever. It just doesn't happen. We do it because we hurt. Other people take our hand, take us to a place that we didn't know about. When we've been drowning all our lives, we don't know anything but water. So we paddle, getting exhausted. We splash other people. We stick our nose out wherever we can. Maybe get a snorkel. People who are really talented can stick a snorkel above the water for a little while, which helps temporarily. But it's all temporary and exhausting. Solution, again, get out of the water. Find people to love you. Trust that they love you. And then practice, to tie two metaphors together, increasing the gauge of your wire to where you get to the place where feeling love is easy. It's just a torrent of electricity. And you're then able to, in turn, share that with other people. New subject. Recently, At our house, we had some pretty severe rain over a period of several days. It can really pour here in Georgia. We have a creek behind our house that normally drains everything that falls in the watershed of our little valley pretty well. Watershed is just defined as the entire land mass that empties into a given creek or river. So our watershed for this creek, not so big. It's about 2 by 3 miles. But when it rains hard, it's a whole lot of water, and it's not a big creek. Once the ground becomes soaked and the rain continues long and fast enough, the creek fills to its capacity. Then it floods. It actually floods where the water goes over the bridge that normally crosses at a fairly nice, safe distance from the water, high enough that you wouldn't want a little child to fall off. So it floods over the bridge that I built to get to the lake and begins to spread out into the yard. It can come up right to the foundation of the house and into the basement of the house. It's done that once in 35 years. Over the years, I've spent a fair bit of time preparing for such floods. That would be something of an understatement. If I said that with a straight expression with my children in the room, they would fall on the floor laughing because I've spent a whole lot of time making the house floodproof. I even built a concrete wall that's, I haven't measured it, 2.5 feet high, all the way around the back to prevent the water from going into the house with 3 small openings in it so that people can walk through. And if it were to flood, I could block the rising water with just a few dozen sandbags instead of what I used to do when the water got high, which was put sandbags all the way around the back of the house. That takes a long time, and it's quite a drag. The concrete wall was a lot of work. But in the long run, if a flood occurs, I'll be glad I had it. I also dug out deep holes in 2 corners of the house, really deep, like many feet below the foundation of the house, so that I could put a sump pump in and pump water out from below the foundation of the house. In the process of doing all this work, I have literally moved roughly, I calculated once just for fun, but more than 1 million pounds of mud and gravel. I know, it couldn't possibly be 1 million pounds. Yeah, ask my kids. Any of them. Each one of them will swear that they moved 1 million pounds all by themselves. So it's more than 1 million. Then 2 more drainage holes at the back edge of the foundation, in addition to the ones at the corners of the house, then put in sump pumps into all 4 holes, and then did the plumbing and the valves to drain the water. Then every 3 years, you have to replace the pumps because pumps rust in a sump hole. So a lot of work. Now, back to me telling you that one day it had been raining for several days and the creek was rising. So toward the end of that rain that I was describing, I was outside filling an enormous hole with topsoil. And I was preparing to plant a couple of beautiful bushes, which now really are growing nicely. I noticed that the drainage ditch from the street was filling with water. So, I thought, looks like a lot of water. I ought to go check the creek. Sure enough, full and rising and headed out into the middle of the lawn. So I figured I'd just watch it. But I thought, I ought to check the pumps, in the 2 corners of the house. I was on my way to the house and I went, check the pumps. Now, the water wasn't close to the house. The water was, 200 feet from the house. But I figured, I'll look. And one of the pumps, so I've gone to all this trouble to put all this gravel and all this work and 2 holes in the corner. And after doing all that work, one of the pumps had simply rusted shut. It didn't function anymore. So power went to the pump and it just sort of did nothing. A good thing to know, yes? If you've got water coming up to your house, it's a good thing to know that one of the pumps that you're counting on to keep your house dry ain't working. Well, the water was now rising faster. And all I had to do was replace one pump. Now, yeah, in the rain, annoying, had to replumb it, had to cut the thing, had to put in a connector, had to work with the valve, had to use PVC primer and glue in the rain, which turns out to be much easier when Don is holding an umbrella over your work. In fact, infinitely easier. It took maybe half an hour to do all that, to replace a pump, replumb it, all that stuff. But it only took half an hour after all that work done over a period of years before. When the water is rising, it's too late to do all the preparatory work. You can only have the finishing touches left to do when the water is rising. As I saw in one television program one day, the lead actor of the show said, "When did Noah build the ark?" And the other person looked at him like, "I don't know what year it was." No, he said, "No, Noah built the ark before the flood." When whatever flood comes in your life, you better have built the ark. Now, when the flood came, he still had to lift the door of the ark, which was some enormous, incredible structure I can hardly imagine, seal it and shut it in a way that the water couldn't come in. So he still had work to do, but only the last little bit. It's the same with our emotional strength. When crises come, and they will, we want to draw on strength that takes years of solid work and practice to develop. Strength usually that we did not build in the years before. We want some magical thing to happen. Some crisis occurs, and we want to draw on strength that we didn't put there. We want to pump out a hole that we never dug. We want to lift an object with strength that we never developed because we never worked out. It doesn't work like that. We have to start now doing the work that we will need years from now. Let me repeat. We have to start now doing the work that we will need years from now. That's intuitively obvious, but it's not obvious to us in the now. In the now, we'd rather, lie on the couch and eat Cheetos. Who wouldn't? But how do we know when we'll need that strength? How many years in the future will the crisis be? We don't. How do I know the next time the creek will rise and come up to the foundation? I don't. So all we can do is prepare now. Practice now. Make mistakes. Recheck our pumps like I did when the water was rising. Learn and repeat over and over. So I'm going to repeat it again. All we can do is prepare, practice, make mistakes, learn, and repeat over and over, starting when? Now. New subject. This is from a man who has experienced considerable unconditional love. He says, "My father is dying. Recently, I traveled some distance to be with him, probably for the last time. I would not have had any idea how to handle this end-of-life meeting with my own father before my experience with real love. I didn't talk very much with him. Even though I'd traveled a very long way to be with him, we didn't talk that much. I sat with my hand firmly on his chest." That's so touching. He said, "I put my hand on his chest in much the same way that you put your hand on mine." He continued, he said, "My father put his hand on my hand, and with my other hand, I firmly held his hand. So I had his hand sandwiched between both of mine. Sometimes I rubbed his chest. We connected, possibly more than we ever have in all my life." This is a really sweet experience. His father's dying, and this is the best experience they've ever had. In the past, he said, I would have talked to him. I would have talked about the past. I would have yammered. I would have talked about his death. No, just touched him and loved him. He said this was much better, just loving him as he felt it. Yeah, I'll bet it was. Great. I mean, how lovely for both of you. He said, I watched as my mother and sisters fussed over him, fussed around him, fussed about him, trying to make him happy, thinking, worrying, almost like they were trying to keep him alive. Almost like they had to do it. He liked it that I didn't do that I just sat there and held his hand. He knew I loved him, but was just letting him be. There was no trying to keep him alive. There was no worrying about his death, no trying to get him to take his medication like my mother and sisters were doing. There was no expecting him to answer questions. They were asking him endless questions. You just did what dying people love. They don't like all the fussing. They've already been through the fussing in life. This is the end of everything where they're going to leave all the fussing and they just ain't all that attracted to it. Imagine. He said that he felt like our roles were reversed. And it just, in other words, father-son. And it just let him relax and feel like, in his words, that was all he'd ever need. Wow, what a thing to say. What a thing for us to get in our heads. That here's a guy who, after being alive for 80 plus years, gets to the end of his life and says, all I'll ever need is this. You putting your hand on my chest, you holding my hand, you holding my hand with your other hand. That's it. That's all I need. So nice for him to share that with me unexpectedly. The man is still talking. His perception is that I sat with him all night. Later on, he referred to that I sat with him all night. It wasn't even close to all night, but it felt like that to him. It felt like the experience just was eternal. And I'm happy. Loving him unconditionally was one of the best experiences I have ever had. And it kind of had to be unconditional, didn't it? You didn't ask him any questions. You didn't ask him for anything. You weren't looking for resolution of some past disagreement. No, you just loved, and he couldn't give you anything in return. You just loved him. You continue. And it gave me confidence that I can do this for other people. I don't have to wait till they're nearly dying. What a healing feeling. Beautiful. New subject. A woman, Celeste, called me to clear up an interaction that she had had with her sister. I had spoken with both of them. She was eager to show me how I had misunderstood. So I've spoken to both Celeste and her sister, and Celeste was calling to correct me, to show me how I had just misunderstood something. She said to me, you forgot that email, the one that said blah, 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 whatever it was. She said, now, the email said, remember on the call of the 15th, whatever date it is, remember when I said my husband was in the room and blah, 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 blah. And she just went over detail after detail. And that's why I say blah, 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 because all the details don't matter. And frankly, now I don't even remember what she's talking about. Look at the ways she was right. That's what she was looking for. I'm not here to tell people they're right. That's not my job. I'm here to love people and teach people. Being right is kind of boring and gets kind of exhausting to keep up. People don't have to participate in my simply loving and teaching, but being right is boring and fruitless, and I have no interest in it. And I told her that. I said, you're being right, and it's kind of boring. She said she didn't want to be the only one who was wrong, and feel bad about herself. She didn't want to be the only one who was wrong. Actually, the truth is she didn't want to be wrong at all and feel bad about herself. And I said, that's the thing. In one sentence, you described the problem. You equated wrong with being bad. That's it. They're not the same. We all do this. So every single person listening to me right now, this is about you. She equated wrong with bad, and they're not the same. I continued. You are wrong to her. This was a really serious conflict she was having with her sister, and she wanted to prove she was right. I said, you're wrong about your interaction with your sister, about being right with me, about missing the point of living, which is joy, not being right. I said, you are wrong in, 100 ways, but you're not bad. I repeated that with her. You're wrong in all these ways, and I listed a bunch. But honey, not bad, just learning. I said, you hate being wrong because then you're out of control. That's how she finds safety in her life. The world is unbalanced and unfair when you're out of control, and you hate that. She actually used the word unbalanced and unfair. She said, well, why do I do this? Simple. Because as a child, the world was out of your control. And when it was unfair and unbalanced, because your mother controlled everything, when you control somebody else, it's not a unilateral deal. It's not just you feel in control. We always feel in control at the expense of somebody else. So I feel in control, and as a result, you feel demeaned and bad and unloved and afraid and wounded, and on it goes. That's how I maintain my control, is by making you less. And I said to her, that's why you feel bad when you're wrong. Your mother made you wrong intentionally to demean you, make you feel bad, make you feel unloved, afraid, wounded, out of control, chaotic, unbalanced, unfair, so she could control you. Because she would step in and control all. She would get rid of at least all the chaos and unbalance. Why? Because she was master of the universe. Now everything's in balance again. It's insane, but it worked for her temporarily. And in a really bizarre way, it kind of worked for you. You got to see that the world was in balance again when she was the boss of everything and everybody. You didn't like it when you were the one being demeaned, but now you're the one doing it. And you're enjoying the sense of control that your mother did. As a child, you were victimized. You really were. You didn't make it up. And it hurt. And you formed an association, a link, just like the Pavlov's dog experiment. You formed a link between out of control and bad and pain. You didn't form that association by yourself. Your mother did it for you. When you were out of control, she made you feel bad, and it hurt. She did that to you. And because you were young, you simply believed it. You believed that pain and bad and out of control were inextricably intertwined, linked. So now, if there's any unfairness, read that, unbalanced and out of control, because they're linked, out of control, you immediately experience all the pain and badness of your childhood. See that? Have you ever worked with a chain? I work with chains outside all the time. Chains work because they're linked. If they weren't linked, we wouldn't call them chains. We would call them little odd pieces of metal. But no, they're linked. And you linked chaotic, out of control, bad pain. So all you have to do, if you work with a chain, is move one link anywhere along the chain. I've got chains that are hundreds of links long. All you have to do is pull on one link, and all the rest follow. They all move because they're linked. That's what happens with you. Those are linked. Chaotic, out of control, bad, you being bad, and pain. So move any one of those, touch any one of those, and the others just kick in. So in the midst of chaos for you, you're bad. So if you feel bad yourself now, what do? You try to control things. You feel bad. You don't know how to get rid of bad. So you pull on the control link and they put everything back in line again. See? But it never works. So what's the real solution? Same old stuff, kid. Because feeling loved and loving and being responsible and being happy, those are also linked. How about that? Inextricably by law linked. So you pull on one of those links and the others will follow. Trust the love you have. You will immediately not feel bad. You'll realize you're not bad. Now the old links are broken and you've formed a new chain, a new one. You haven't just revised the old one. Nothing can make you feel like a bad person again. Not once you know you're worthwhile, because you can't be made to feel bad. The sting of unfairness and lack of control is gone because you've forged a new chain, a productive one. New subject. I know a woman who has been used, well, all of her life, which is, well, not that uncommon. After feeling sufficiently loved, she finally looked at her relationships, her family, her job. She decided to change everything. Well, why not? You know, if you're going to get a new house, why not just start from the ground up? And she said, in the middle of all this, the price I'm paying is far too high, meaning in the old way of living. I'm paying with my whole soul just for the privilege of being manipulated and abused. Memorize that. That's what most people do. We're taught as children to please other people, to be manipulated, to be controlled, to be abused, just like the woman we just got through talking about. We're taught to do that. We're paying with our whole souls for the privilege of being controlled. You're kidding. We're taught to please as children, then we can't stop. We wear a sign on our forehead that says, use me, because then at the very least we'll be useful, won't we? Now we're going to feel controlled and terrible about ourselves, but if the only thing we've ever been taught is that we're to be used, it's familiar. At least the world isn't chaotic. It's insane the way that we've been taught to live. And now we can learn to live differently, which is insanely cool. New subject. I know a young lady who had gotten to the point where her anxiety was crippling her. She couldn't continue her schooling. She couldn't hold a job. All she could do was live with her parents and feel bad. So she'd live in her parents' basement and spend all day feeling bad and, whatever, reading books, watching television, keeping a journal of her heart rate and blood pressure and temperature. I'm not kidding. When you live all by yourself and you have no source of joy, you come up with all kinds of crazy little habits. And then she got loved. She was astonished at how different it was from everything she'd ever known. Yeah. She liked being loved. Imagine that. It changed her perspective on everything. She's discovering who she really is, and it's a beautiful thing to see, and she's a beautiful person to see. She called me one night after she'd been out with her friends, and she said this: I'm finally getting the point that you've been telling me. Now that I'm not afraid all the time, I'm figuring out that I am different from other people. I don't really like being in large groups anymore, as in the groups of friends that I've always been with, where everybody's talking about, well, nothing. Their makeup, their hair, the score of the local athletic contest. I don't like being where people expect me to laugh at their jokes and behave exactly like they do. We talked about this at the top of the hour. What do? We spend our lives expecting people to be like us or us wanting to be like them. She said, I don't like that anymore. I'm discovering that actually I'm kind of a quiet person. I can finally say it, she says. I'm different from most people, and that's okay. Some people might call it less in some ways. Some people might call it more. I don't really care. It's just okay. It's okay to be me, even though most people would not understand that, or maybe even like me. I'm not going to sell myself anymore to get the approval of people who would not accept who I really am. That is so profound, I'm going to repeat it. I'm not going to sell myself anymore to get the approval of people who won't accept who I really am. I like living this way. And I like it for you. It's a way that we can all learn to live. We can learn to live being happy, being ourselves, which means living without fear, living without pain, living without confusion and chaos and being controlled and manipulated, nor doing the same to other people. We can learn to live like that. That's happy living, and it's worth whatever it takes for us to reach it. We'll talk again in a week.